As you tuck yourself in and let your mind wander tonight, consider the quiet borderlands between wakefulness and dreams. Here, in these twilight states where animals retreat into hibernation and sleep disorders reveal their rare secrets, biology whispers its most profound mysteries. Let's explore these boundary spaces together, where rest transforms into something else entirely. You've probably heard the term hibernation before, perhaps thinking of bears curled up in caves, sleeping through the winter. But what we're talking about here, what scientists puzzle over, is far more extreme than the deep sleep you or I might wish for on a Sunday morning. Hibernation exists on a continuum, a spectrum of suspended animation that challenges our very definitions of what it means to be awake and alive. Let's start with a concept called daily torpor. Think of it as the economy mode for a small creature. A hummingbird, for instance, burns through energy at a breathtaking rate just to stay airborne. When night falls and nectar is scarce, it can't afford to run at full throttle, so it dials everything down: its metabolic rate, its heartbeat, its body temperature, entering a state of profound rest that conserves precious fuel. It's like a laptop switching to sleep mode to save battery, but the bird is still somewhat aware, able to rouse quickly if danger approaches. This is the lighter end of the spectrum. True hibernation, the multi-day or even multi-month variety, is an entirely different category of existence. It's not merely sleeping through a season, it's a complete physiological overhaul. Imagine planning a cross-country road trip where you know there will be no gas stations for hundreds of miles. You wouldn't just drive slower, you would modify the entire engine to run on fumes, finding a way to make every last drop of fuel count for miles it was never designed to travel. That's what a ground squirrel or a hedgehog does. As winter approaches, it doesn't just find a cozy spot. Its body initiates a dramatic, orchestrated shutdown. Its metabolic rate, the speed at which it burns energy, can plummet to just 1% of its normal awake state. Its heart, which might beat 200 times a minute in summer, slows to a mere 5 or 10 beats per minute. Its body temperature doesn't just get a little chilly, it crashes, often aligning nearly with the freezing air of its burrow. This radical cooldown is the key to the mystery. For us, a drop in core temperature of just a few degrees is a medical emergency, hypothermia, leading to confusion, organ failure, and eventually death. But for the true hibernator, this frigid state is a carefully controlled, life-preserving strategy. The animal isn't dying, it's entering a state of suspended animation where time itself seems to stretch. Its cells don't require much oxygen because they're barely functioning. Its brain activity becomes so minimal, it's almost undetectable. The line between life and a death-like sleep becomes astonishingly thin. Why go to such extremes? The answer is a brutal arithmetic of energy. Staying warm and active in a frozen, foodless landscape requires more calories than can possibly be gathered. Hibernation solves this equation by virtually eliminating the cost of living. The animal lives off its own carefully stored fat reserves, but it spends them with impossible frugality. A chipmunk that might survive only a week on its hoard of nuts if it stayed active can instead make that same stash last for months, its slowed metabolism stretching each calorie into weeks of sustenance. It's fascinating to consider this not as sleep, but as an alternative state of being. Our nightly sleep is for restoration, for memory consolidation, cellular repair, and mental reset. Hibernation is for survival, a strategic retreat from environmental impossibility. The hibernator isn't dreaming of spring. In its deepest torpor, it likely isn't dreaming at all. It has stepped outside the normal rhythms of appetite, movement, and consciousness, achieving a stillness so profound it defies our everyday understanding of what an animal is. So, when we say hibernation, we're speaking of physiology pushed to its absolute limits. It is the body learning to whisper instead of shout, to endure instead of act, to wait in perfect, frozen patience for the world to become hospitable again. It is the art of becoming almost, but not quite, not alive. A secret held in the slowed heartbeat of a creature buried beneath the snow. And this leads us to wonder, if this is what the body does, then what magnificent and mysterious control panel must exist within the brain to orchestrate such a delicate descent into oblivion, and more miraculously, to command the return. Now that we've dipped our toes into the world of torpor, let's gently explore how the brain orchestrates this remarkable state. Imagine for a moment that within the sleeping brain there exists something like the control room of an ancient, magnificent observatory, a place where switches are flipped and levers pulled, not to control telescopes and lenses, but to guide the body into profound states of rest. This is where we find the neurological controls of torpor, the brain's own slumber switch. Deep within the brainstem, nestled like a small, vital processing center, lies a region called the ventrolateral medulla. Think of this area as the master thermostat for your body's most basic functions. It doesn't control the temperature of your home, but rather the temperature of your very being. When an animal prepares to enter torpor, this region begins to dial down the body's internal thermostat, allowing core temperature to drop gradually and safely. It's a deliberate, controlled descent, not a sudden failure of the heating system. The ventrolateral medulla coordinates with other brain areas to slow the heart rate, reduce breathing, and initiate the metabolic slowdown that defines torpor. It's the neural command center that says, begin the descent into deep conservation. Then we have the preoptic area of the hypothalamus, which sits near the base of the brain like a wise old gatekeeper. This region is deeply involved in sleep regulation and thermoregulation, the perfect combination for managing torpor states. Researchers have discovered that specific neurons within this preoptic area act like specialized sentinels. When activated, they can promote sleep and lower body temperature. When inhibited, they help maintain wakefulness and normal warmth. In animals that naturally hibernate, these neurons have evolved to work in perfect harmony with the torpor process. They help coordinate the timing of entry into torpor, the maintenance of the dormant state, and the eventual arousal back to normal function. It's as if these neurons hold the blueprint for metabolic suppression, a genetic memory of how to safely power down. What's truly fascinating is how these brain regions work together not in isolation, but as part of an intricate neural network. Picture a symphony orchestra preparing to play a particularly quiet, slow movement. The ventrolateral medulla might be the conductor, setting the overall tempo, while the preoptic hypothalamus acts like the section leaders, the first violins or principal woodwinds guiding specific aspects of the performance. Other brain areas join in. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, our internal biological clock, helps time the torpor cycle to environmental cues like day length and temperature. The pineal gland, through its production of melatonin, adds another layer of seasonal timing. And throughout the brain, neurotransmitter systems shift their balance. Adenosine builds up, promoting sleepiness, while certain arousal systems like orexin and histamine quiet down. This orchestration becomes even more remarkable when we consider how scientists have learned to manipulate these systems. Through careful research, they've discovered that stimulating specific neurons in the preoptic hypothalamus can induce a torpor-like state even in animals that don't normally hibernate. It's as if they've found the right combination of neural switches to flip, creating what we might call synthetic torpor. In some experiments, gentle cooling of this brain region or the application of certain chemicals can trigger the body to enter this conserved state. Other approaches involve using focused ultrasound or optogenetics, a technique where light activates genetically modified neurons to turn these neural circuits on and off with remarkable precision. Think of it this way: if the natural torpor of hibernating animals is like a master pianist playing a complex sonata from memory, then synthetic torpor research is like learning to read the sheet music, note by note, until we can play the same beautiful, quiet melody ourselves. We're deciphering which neural notes to play and in what sequence to safely guide the body into suspended animation. What's particularly elegant about these neurological controls is their specificity. They don't simply shut down the brain wholesale. Instead, they carefully modulate different systems. Higher cognitive functions quiet dramatically, the cerebral cortex enters a state of profound quiescence. Yet certain protective mechanisms remain active. The brain maintains just enough activity to monitor vital functions and respond to true emergencies. It's not complete unconsciousness, but rather a deeply focused state of conservation, where energy is preserved for only the most essential processes. As we rest here, contemplating these intricate neural controls, we might reflect on how evolution has crafted such precise mechanisms for survival. The brain regions that govern torpor represent millions of years of refinement, biological solutions to the challenges of scarcity and cold. And as modern science begins to unravel their secrets, we glimpse not only how animals survive winter's grip, but potentially how we might one day help humans endure medical challenges that currently overwhelm our physiology. But of course, the brain doesn't work alone in this grand performance of metabolic suppression. Once the neural commands are given, the entire body must respond in concert, creating a symphony of physiological adaptation that allows survival through the long, quiet months of torpor. Now, having glimpsed the survival mechanisms that allow animals to survive hibernation, let's journey deeper into the remarkable transformations that occur within their bodies during this suspended state. This isn't simply a long nap. It's a complete physiological recalibration, a delicate ballet of systems slowing down and rewiring themselves for endurance. Imagine, if you will, the body as a sophisticated home. During the active summer months, it's bustling with activity. Lights are on in every room. The furnace is running, and the kitchen is constantly preparing elaborate meals. But as winter approaches and hibernation begins, the entire house enters an ultra-efficient mode. Most of the lights are turned off. The thermostat is set to just above freezing to conserve energy, and the kitchen switches from making complex gourmet dishes to preparing simple, sustaining broths. This shift in the metabolic kitchen is perhaps the most profound change. During active months, animals primarily burn glucose, that quick, easy sugar that fuels immediate activity. It's like using premium gasoline for high-performance driving. But glucose stores are limited. To survive months without eating, hibernators must switch their entire energy source. They transition to burning fat, specifically a type of fat called brown adipose tissue. Think of this as switching from a finite supply of premium fuel to tapping into a massive, slow-burning diesel reserve. The body becomes a master of fat metabolism, breaking down these stored lipids with remarkable efficiency to provide just enough energy to keep the vital pilot light of life flickering. Their metabolic rate can plummet to just 1 to 5% of normal, a staggering reduction. Their body temperature drops to match the surrounding environment, sometimes hovering just a few degrees above freezing, entering a state scientists call torpor. Now, with the body's furnace turned so low and the heart beating perhaps only a few times per minute, you might wonder, how do the organs survive? This brings us to one of hibernation's most protective mysteries. When blood flow slows to a trickle, most mammals would suffer catastrophic organ damage from ischemia, the medical term for tissues being starved of oxygen. But hibernators have evolved exquisite protections. Their cells produce special proteins that act like molecular antifreeze, stabilizing cell membranes and preventing damage from the cold and low oxygen. Their hearts and brains become remarkably resistant to the buildup of waste products that would normally be toxic. It's as if each cell dons a protective winter coat and enters a state of suspended animation, patiently waiting for spring's return. Let's consider the cardiovascular system during this deep suspension. A ground squirrel's heart rate might drop from 200 beats per minute to just 5 or 10. Blood pressure falls dramatically. The blood itself changes, becoming thicker and more viscous as plasma volume decreases, a change that would cause dangerous clots in humans. But in hibernators, special adaptations prevent thrombosis. The entire circulation becomes a slow, deliberate river rather than a rushing torrent, delivering just enough oxygen to keep tissues alive in their dormant state. Perhaps one of the most counterintuitive adaptations involves the immune system. In our active state, our immune defenses are constantly on patrol, white blood cells circulating, antibodies being produced, inflammatory responses ready to spring into action at the slightest sign of invasion. This constant vigilance requires tremendous energy. During hibernation, this system is profoundly depressed. The production of new immune cells slows to a near halt. Inflammatory responses are muted. From our perspective, this seems incredibly risky, leaving the body vulnerable to infection. But hibernation occurs in the cold of winter when pathogens are less active and the animals are secluded in their dens. More remarkably, research suggests that during their brief periodic arousals, those moments when they warm up and become active for a day or so, their immune systems spring back to life with remarkable efficiency, dealing with any threats that may have arisen during their suspended state before they sink back into torpor. It's a strategic gamble. Conserve energy by lowering defenses during the safest period, then mobilize quickly during brief windows of vulnerability. Every system in the hibernator's body participates in this great slowdown. Kidney function decreases dramatically, with urine production nearly stopping. The digestive system becomes dormant. After all, there's no food coming in to process. Even the bones, which normally require the stress of movement to maintain their density, enter a protected state where they resist the demineralization that bedridden humans experience. The entire organism becomes a masterpiece of energy conservation, with every biochemical pathway optimized for endurance rather than performance. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the quiet wisdom of these suspended bodies. They teach us that survival isn't always about activity and consumption. Sometimes it's about profound stillness, about knowing when to turn down the internal lights and conserve your resources for the season ahead. They show us that the body possesses remarkable resilience when given permission to rest deeply, to slow its rhythms to match the quiet pulse of the earth itself. And in this state of deep suspension, punctuated only by the occasional stirring back to life, we find our next mystery waiting to be explored. Now, as we look more closely at this deep winter sleep, you might imagine that animals simply enter their burrows, lower their metabolic rate into that profound torpor, and remain completely still until spring returns. But nature rarely works in absolutes, and hibernation has its own surprising rhythms woven within. Even in this deepest of rests, there is a pattern to the pause. Every few weeks, depending on the species and the conditions, something remarkable happens. The hibernating heart, which has slowed to perhaps just a few beats per minute, begins to speed up once more. The shallow breathing deepens, and the body temperature climbs back toward normal levels. The animal awakens, but not fully into its active summer state. It's more of a partial arousal, a brief return from the abyss. This phenomenon is called Interbout arousal, and it is essential to the very survival of the hibernator. Think of it like this: you cannot simply pause your life indefinitely without eventually needing to address the basic maintenance of living. Your car, even if parked safely in a garage, still needs the occasional check, perhaps to start the engine and circulate fluids to prevent everything from seizing up. An animal's body, in its deep metabolic slowdown, operates similarly. The profound state of torpor is not a perfect on and off switch. Even in that deep freeze, cellular processes continue at a slow trickle, and waste products still accumulate. These periodic arousals, therefore, serve several crucial purposes. One of the most vital is waste elimination. The animal's kidneys, nearly shut down in the cold, torpid state, must come back online to filter the blood and process the metabolic byproducts that have been building up. After a few weeks of torpor, the body's internal chemistry needs a recalibration, a rebalancing act that requires being closer to its normal operating temperature. They also serve a deep physiological reset for the immune system. Extended periods of cold torpor can leave an animal vulnerable to infection. Its immune defenses are dramatically suppressed. This periodic warming allows the immune system to briefly reactivate, to patrol the body and address any brewing threats that might have taken advantage of the prolonged stillness. It's like a security system doing a full diagnostic sweep in a sleeping house. There's another fascinating reason tied to the very architecture of the brain itself. During these arousals, hibernators will often engage in a short burst of sleep, actual rapid eye movement sleep, the kind we associate with dreaming and memory consolidation. They rouse from torpor, sleep briefly, and then dive back down into it. This suggests the body has a fundamental non-negotiable need for true sleep cycles that even the most profound torpor cannot satisfy indefinitely. These arousals are costly, though. The process of warming a chilled body back up is energetically expensive. A ground squirrel might spend 80% of its entire winter fat reserves just to fuel these brief periodic warm-ups. It's a massive investment, which tells us just how indispensable these periodic breaks are. Evolution has deemed the price worth paying. This rhythm, the slow, deep dip into torpor, followed by the gradual climb back to a warmer, more active state, creates a profound biological cadence, a pulse, a breath within the long silence of winter. It reminds us that even in the most extreme states of rest, there is a need for cycles, for pauses within the pauses, a need to occasionally stir, to tend to the housekeeping of the body before settling once more into the deep. It's a beautiful, efficient, and rhythmic system. But our human relationship with sleep can also be governed by its own rare, mysterious, and far less efficient rhythms. As we leave the world of hibernation behind and turn our attention inward to the frontiers of human sleep science, we find conditions that defy easy explanation. They are like shadowy counterparts to nature's elegant adaptations, and perhaps the rarest and most haunting of them all is a condition where sleep itself seems to forget how to end. Now let's explore one of the most intriguing and mysterious sleep disorders known to medicine, Kleine-Levin syndrome, sometimes called Sleeping Beauty syndrome. Imagine waking up not just groggy or tired, but in a state where reality itself feels distant and dreamlike, where you might sleep for 16, 18, even 20 hours a day, only to wake for a few brief periods before surrendering once more to that profound, irresistible slumber. This is the world of those with Kleine-Levin syndrome, a rare recurrent hypersomnia that typically appears in adolescence and transforms ordinary sleep into something far more consuming. The disorder is like a biological alarm clock that's been rewired to operate on an entirely different scale. Instead of the regular circadian rhythm that most of us follow, awake during the day, asleep at night, individuals with Kleine-Levin syndrome experience episodes that can last days, weeks, or even months, during which they sleep the majority of each 24-hour period. They'll wake only to eat, use the bathroom, and then return immediately to bed, as if pulled by an invisible tide they cannot resist. During these waking periods, they often appear in what doctors describe as a dazed state, disoriented, confused, and emotionally detached from their surroundings. It's as if their consciousness is operating through a thick fog, one that clears only when the episode finally passes, sometimes as abruptly as it began. What makes this condition particularly fascinating are the behavioral changes that accompany the hypersomnia. Many individuals experience what's called hyperphagia, a compulsive, almost frantic eating when they are awake. They might consume enormous amounts of food, sometimes without preference or discernment, eating whatever is available. Others exhibit what's known as hypersexuality, engaging in inappropriate or uninhibited sexual behaviors that are completely out of character for them. and there's often significant irritability, apathy, and what doctors term childlike behavior, a regression to simpler ways of thinking and expressing oneself. These symptoms suggest that Kleine-Levin syndrome isn't just about sleep regulation. It appears to affect multiple systems in the brain simultaneously, creating this constellation of unusual behaviors alongside the profound need for sleep. Picture the brain as an orchestra, with different sections representing various functions: sleep-wake cycles, appetite regulation, sexual behavior, mood control. In Kleine-Levin syndrome, it's as if the conductor has temporarily stepped away and certain sections begin playing at unusual volumes while others fall nearly silent. The hypothalamus, that tiny but crucial region deep in the brain, is thought to be at the center of this dysregulation. This almond-sized structure serves as the body's master control center for many automatic functions, including sleep, hunger, thirst, and body temperature. When it malfunctions, the entire system can become unbalanced, much like a thermostat that's suddenly been set to extremes. The onset of Kleine-Levin syndrome typically occurs during adolescence, and while the cause remains unknown, researchers have noticed some intriguing patterns. Many cases seem to be preceded by an infection, often a flu-like illness, leading some scientists to suspect an autoimmune component, that the body's immune system might be mistakenly attacking parts of the brain. There may also be genetic factors at play, as the condition sometimes runs in families. But despite these clues, the syndrome remains largely enigmatic, a puzzle with many pieces that don't quite fit together yet. Living with Kleine-Levin syndrome is profoundly challenging, both for the individual experiencing it and for their loved ones. Imagine being a teenager, suddenly missing weeks or months of school, relationships, and normal adolescent life. Imagine being a parent, watching your child disappear into this state of prolonged sleep, emerging only briefly and changed. The episodes can recur without warning, sometimes separated by months or even years of normal functioning. There's no cure, though some medications can help manage symptoms. Lithium, used typically for bipolar disorder, has shown promise in preventing or reducing the frequency of episodes for some patients. Stimulants might help with alertness during waking periods, but they don't address the underlying disorder. What's particularly poignant about this condition is that during their normal periods between episodes, individuals with Kleine-Levin syndrome are typically completely healthy, with normal cognitive function and personality. It's as if they have two separate existences, one in the waking world and another in this recurrent state of prolonged sleep and altered consciousness. This duality makes diagnosis particularly challenging, as doctors might initially suspect depression, drug use, or even malingering before recognizing the distinct pattern of Kleine-Levin syndrome. The syndrome reminds us how fragile and complex our sleep-wake regulation truly is. Most of us take for granted the reliable rhythm of our days and nights, the gentle transition from wakefulness to sleep and back again. But for those with Kleine-Levin syndrome, this rhythm becomes something unpredictable, something that can sweep them away for extended periods into a state that's neither fully awake nor truly asleep in the normal sense. It's a reminder that sleep isn't just a passive state of rest, but an active, carefully regulated process involving multiple brain regions working in harmony. As we consider this rare condition, we begin to see how sleep disorders exist on a spectrum, from the total inability to sleep that we'll explore next, to this overwhelming compulsion to sleep that characterizes Kleine-Levin syndrome. Both represent extremes of our sleep-wake regulation system gone awry, showing us just how essential that delicate balance truly is for our health and well-being. But there exists another extreme on this spectrum, one where sleep becomes not just difficult or excessive, but utterly impossible, a condition so rare and so devastating that it offers perhaps the most tragic window into what happens when sleep simply refuses to come. Imagine for a moment that sleep, the gentle refuge we all slip into each night, was suddenly taken from you. Not for one night, not for a week, but forever. The ability to close your eyes and drift into restorative rest, stripped away completely. This is not a philosophical question or a hypothetical exercise. It is the harrowing reality of a condition known as fatal familial insomnia, a rare genetic disease that gradually, inexorably, steals away the capacity for sleep until the mind and body, deprived of this essential function, simply cannot continue. Fatal familial insomnia is exactly what its name suggests. Familial, meaning it runs in families, fatal, meaning it inevitably leads to death, and insomnia, meaning the inability to sleep. But this description barely scratches the surface of the profound tragedy it represents. It's caused by a tiny, almost imperceptible error in a single gene, a mutation that causes a normal protein in the brain to fold incorrectly. When this happens, the misshapen protein, called a prion, begins to corrupt other healthy proteins around it, creating a chain reaction of destruction. Think of it like a single incorrectly folded piece of origami that, when placed among perfectly folded ones, causes all the others to misfold in exactly the same wrong way. This misfolding spreads through a critical part of the brain called the thalamus. The thalamus is often described as the brain's relay station. It sits deep within, processing nearly all sensory information before sending it to the appropriate regions of the cerebral cortex for interpretation. One of its most vital roles is regulating sleep-wake cycles. It's the gateway to sleep, the switch that allows our consciousness to transition from the alert, waking state to the peaceful realm of slumber. In fatal familial insomnia, the prions attack and destroy this gateway. The thalamus literally wastes away, its cells dying off. As it degenerates, its ability to regulate sleep diminishes and then vanishes entirely. The progression of the disease is both predictable and heartbreaking. It typically begins in midlife, between the ages of 30 and 60, striking without warning in someone who may have watched their parent or grandparent suffer the same fate. The first signs are often subtle, a creeping, progressive insomnia that resists all conventional treatments. A person might find themselves lying awake for longer and longer periods, feeling exhausted but utterly unable to cross the threshold into sleep. As weeks and months pass, the insomnia becomes absolute. Sleep becomes fragmented, then reduced to mere minutes of light, dreamless dozing, and finally disappears altogether. But the loss of sleep is just the beginning. As the thalamus continues to deteriorate, other functions begin to unravel. The autonomic nervous system, which controls things like blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature, goes haywire. Patients may experience intense sweating, high blood pressure, rapid heart rates, and fevers. Their pupils may become constricted. They may develop strange, involuntary movements and lose coordination, a condition known as ataxia. Cognitive decline sets in. Memory falters, attention fragments, and eventually dementia takes hold. Hallucinations and paranoia are common in the later stages, as the mind, starved of the restorative processing that only sleep can provide, begins to break down. The entire course of the disease, from the first sleepless night to the end, usually spans between 7 and 36 months. There is no cure. No treatment can stop or reverse the prion's destructive path. Medicine can only offer palliative care, attempting to manage the terrifying symptoms and provide some comfort in the face of an inevitable outcome. The final stage is one of complete exhaustion. The body, having been in a perpetual state of high alert, of fight or flight, for months or years, simply gives out. To understand the sheer importance of sleep, one need only look at what happens in its utter absence. Sleep is not a luxury or a passive state. It is an active, non-negotiable biological imperative. It's when our brains consolidate memories, flush out metabolic waste, repair cellular damage, and regulate hormones. Without it, the system collapses. Fatal familial insomnia provides a tragic, natural experiment that demonstrates this truth with devastating clarity. The disease is exceedingly rare, with only a few dozen families known to carry the genetic mutation worldwide. Its history is traced back to a single individual in Venice, Italy, in the 18th century, from whom all known cases descend. Knowing one carries the gene presents an unimaginable psychological burden, a sword of Damocles hanging over every night of normal sleep. For those who develop symptoms, the experience is one of profound isolation. To be awake, fully conscious as the world sleeps around you, night after night after night, is a unique form of torment. So as we rest our heads tonight in the gentle embrace of our own ordinary sleep, we might pause to feel a profound gratitude for this simple nightly gift, the ability to slip away, to restore, to dream. It is a foundation of our very existence, and its absolute loss reminds us of its priceless, fragile necessity. This rare and solemn disorder shows us the outer boundaries of what sleep means for human life, and in doing so, prepares us to look at what happens not when sleep is absent, but when its very nature becomes distorted. Imagine, if you will, a theatre of the mind where the grandest productions are staged each night. The actors are phantom figures of memory and imagination. The sets are built from fragments of days past, and the director is your subconscious self. In this private theatre, which we call dreaming, there exists a crucial safety feature, a kind of invisible barrier between the stage and the audience. This barrier is a biological marvel, a temporary paralysis that keeps our sleeping bodies from acting out the dramatic, sometimes violent scenes being played out in our minds. But what happens when that barrier fails? What happens when the dream escapes the confines of the mind and becomes physical? This is the curious and sometimes startling reality of REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBD for short. In its essence, REM sleep behavior disorder is a condition where that fundamental safety mechanism, the muscle paralysis that accompanies our most vivid dream state, simply doesn't engage. The curtain between the dreamer and the dream falls away, and the sleeping person begins to physically enact the scenes playing in their head. Picture it: a person sound asleep begins to talk, shout, laugh, punch, kick, flail their arms, or even get up and walk. They might be fighting off an imaginary attacker, catching an invisible ball, or having a passionate conversation with someone who isn't there. It can be comical, like watching a mime in the dark, but it is often dangerous. Spouses have been injured by errant punches. People have fallen out of bed or walked into walls, furniture or windows, all while completely asleep and immersed in a dream. If you think of sleep as a journey through different territories of consciousness, then REM sleep is the exotic, visually vibrant land of dreams. Normally, during this part of the journey, the traveler's vehicle, the body, is put on autopilot and locked down for safety. In RBD, the traveler is still on that fantastical tour, but they've somehow regained the steering wheel and the pedals. They are driving the dream, literally, with their own limbs. The phenomenon is a stark reminder that the line between our inner and outer worlds is maintained by delicate biological wiring. What makes RBD particularly significant to sleep scientists isn't just the spectacle of it, but what it often portends. It has become a powerful and somewhat alarming biological crystal ball. There is an extraordinarily strong, almost predictive link between REM sleep behavior disorder and the future development of certain neurodegenerative diseases, most notably Parkinson's disease and a form of dementia called Lewy body dementia. For many individuals, RBD is the first clinical sign, sometimes appearing a decade or more before any tremors, stiffness, or cognitive changes become noticeable. The presence of RBD is like a faint early warning smoke signal from deep within the brain's circuitry, long before the main fire of neurodegeneration becomes visible. Researchers believe the condition arises from damage to specific clusters of neurons in the brainstem, the ancient automatic control center at the base of the brain, which are responsible for flipping that paralysis switch during REM sleep. The fact that these same neurons are involved in the pathology of Parkinson's explains this uncanny connection. The sleeping brain, in its dream-enacting state, is quietly revealing a vulnerability that will later manifest in waking life. Now, hearing this might sound concerning, but it's important to understand that not everyone who talks in their sleep or has a restless night has RBD. The difference is one of violence, vividness, and memory. Typical sleep talking is often mumbled, disjointed, and the person rarely gets out of bed. RBD episodes are different. They are elaborate, forceful, and often align perfectly with a vivid dream that the person can recall with startling clarity if awakened during the act. I was being chased by a bear, and I had to fight it off, they might say, and sure enough, you witnessed them thrashing and throwing punches just moments before. This clarity of dream recall is another hallmark feature. The risks of the disorder are very real. Self-injury is common. Beyond bruises and cuts, people have broken bones, suffered concussions, and caused significant property damage. The danger extends to bed partners who can unwittingly become characters in the violent dream narrative. For this reason, diagnosis and management are crucial. A sleep study, a polysomnogram, can confirm RBD by capturing those moments when muscle activity spikes dramatically during REM sleep, breaking the normal pattern of paralysis. Treatment often involves making the bedroom a safer place, removing sharp objects and furniture from around the bed, sometimes even placing a padded mattress on the floor. Medications like clonazepam are often effective in dampening the motor activity and allowing for a safer night's rest for everyone. So, as we contemplate this phenomenon, we see that sleep is not a simple, uniform state of rest. It is a complex landscape with its own rules, borders, and occasional system failures. REM, sleep behavior disorder, shows us that the barrier between our inner dreamscape and the physical world is a fragile one, maintained by a delicate balance of brain chemistry. When that balance is disrupted, dreams don't just stay in our heads, they leap into our bedrooms, carrying with them not just the potential for a midnight disturbance, but sometimes a profound message about the future health of the dreaming brain. And while the dreamer may act out scenes in the safety of their own room, the sleeping mind can venture into even more bizarre territories where it engages in activities we normally reserve for our waking hours. Activities like preparing and eating entire meals, completely unconscious to the world. As we drift through the landscape of sleep's mysteries, we encounter behaviors that seem almost surreal, actions performed while consciousness sleeps, while the body remains in motion. These are parasomnias, a collection of sleep disorders where the boundaries between wakefulness and slumber become blurred. And among these, some of the most fascinating and puzzling are those that occur without any conscious awareness or memory. Consider sleep-related eating disorder, a condition that might sound almost comical until you understand its reality. Imagine waking to find your kitchen in disarray, crumbs scattered, containers opened, sometimes even raw foods partially consumed, with no memory of having done any of this. People with this condition don't simply have nighttime snacks they forget. They engage in complex food preparation while fully asleep. They might cook entire meals, use sharp utensils, consume bizarre combinations of foods, or eat items they would never touch while awake. The next morning, they're left with only evidence and sometimes digestive discomfort, but no recollection of the nocturnal feast. It's as if someone else took control of their body, someone with entirely different culinary preferences and safety standards. Then there's sexsomnia, a condition where people engage in sexual activity while asleep. This isn't about intimate dreams, it's actual physical behavior that ranges from masturbation to initiating sexual contact with a partner, all while completely unconscious. Upon awakening, they have no memory of these events, leaving both confusion and complicated relationship dynamics in their wake. Think of it as sleepwalking's more intimate cousin, where the brain's motor functions are activated while higher cognitive centers remain in deep slumber. Perhaps one of the strangest sensations in the parasomnia family is exploding head syndrome. This has nothing to do with physical pain or danger, despite its alarming name. Instead, imagine being on the verge of sleep when suddenly you hear an incredibly loud noise, a crash, a bang, an explosion that seems to originate inside your own head. Sometimes it's accompanied by a flash of light. The experience lasts only seconds, but it jolts you awake with adrenaline coursing through your body. The silence that follows feels deafening by comparison. It's as if your auditory system decides to fire off one last dramatic signal before shutting down for the night, a final startling announcement that sleep is about to begin. These behaviors occur because different parts of our brain can be in different states simultaneously. Imagine an orchestra where some sections are playing a lullaby while others are still performing a symphony. The conductor, our conscious awareness, has left the stage, but individual musicians continue to play their parts. During parasomnias, the brain regions controlling movement and basic behaviors can activate, while the regions responsible for memory formation and higher reasoning remain in deep sleep. This neural dissociation creates a kind of twilight zone where the body acts without the mind's supervision or recollection. Other unusual sleep behaviors include sleep talking that forms coherent conversations, sleep texting where people send nonsensical messages from their phones, and even sleep driving in rare dangerous cases. Each represents a different pattern of neural activation, where specific brain circuits awaken while others slumber. What's remarkable is how the sleeping brain can perform tasks that we typically associate with conscious intention: preparing food, engaging in communication, even navigating physical spaces, all while the person experiencing it remains completely unaware. These conditions are rarely dangerous in themselves, though they can lead to embarrassment, relationship strain, or in some cases, physical risk. Treatment often involves addressing underlying sleep disorders, managing stress, and creating safe sleep environments, putting locks on refrigerators, securing dangerous items, or having partners sleep in separate rooms when necessary. As we contemplate these nighttime wanderings of the unconscious mind, we're reminded that sleep isn't a simple on-off switch, but rather a complex tapestry of brain states. Each parasomnia offers a unique window into how our neural systems can operate independently, how the threads of consciousness can unravel in fascinating patterns during the night. And with this understanding of sleep's more unusual expressions, we find ourselves better prepared to explore how these insights connect to our understanding of hibernation and deep rest across the animal kingdom. Let's turn our attention now to these intriguing connections. As we contemplate these remarkable adaptations in nature's sleepers, you might be wondering what all this research truly means for us. What practical wisdom can we draw from bears and ground squirrels and those tiny lemurs who have perfected the art of suspended animation? The answer lies where biology meets human need, where the secrets of hibernation begin to inform medicine, trauma care, and even our future among the stars. Think of hibernation research not as simply studying animal behavior, but as uncovering a hidden toolbox that nature has been refining for millions of years. A toolbox filled with biological strategies for slowing metabolism, protecting cells under stress, and preserving function when the body enters a state of profound stillness. And today, scientists are carefully opening that toolbox, hoping to borrow these strategies to help human patients survive what they otherwise could not. Perhaps the most immediate application lies in critical care medicine. Imagine someone suffering a severe stroke or traumatic brain injury. Right now, time is the enemy. Every minute that passes without treatment means more brain cells die, more function is lost. But what if in those crucial first hours, doctors could induce a state of synthetic torpor? They could gently slow the patient's metabolism, reduce the brain's demand for oxygen, and create a protective biological buffer, essentially hitting a pause button on cellular damage while treatment is administered. It's like putting out a fire by first removing the oxygen it needs to burn, giving firefighters time to contain the blaze. Research into this is already underway. Scientists are studying the precise cocktail of chemical signals that triggers natural hibernation, searching for safe ways to replicate this state in non-hibernating animals, and eventually in humans. The goal isn't to make us sleep for months, but to harness the protective low metabolism state for a matter of hours or days, just long enough to bridge the gap between crisis and recovery. This thinking extends to organ transplantation, one of modern medicine's great miracles and greatest logistical challenges. A donated heart or liver is a race against a biological clock, kept on ice and rushed to a recipient. But cooling alone is a crude tool. It slows decay but doesn't stop it, and it can cause its own damage. Now imagine if, instead of simply chilling an organ, we could place it in a state of synthetic hibernation. We could dial down its metabolic activity to near zero, preserving its tissues in a state of suspended animation, not just for hours, but potentially for days. This would transform transplant logistics, making organs available across continents and giving surgeons precious time to find the perfect match. The organ wouldn't just be on ice, it would be in a deep, protective biological sleep. And then we look upward. The ultimate test for these technologies may not be in a hospital on Earth, but on a spacecraft bound for Mars. The challenges of long-duration space travel are immense. Astronauts would face months of exposure to cosmic radiation, the psychological strain of confinement, and the sheer logistical burden of carrying enough food, water, and oxygen for a multi-year journey. Enter the concept of crew torpor. Science fiction has long dreamed of hibernation pods for interstellar travel, but the science is now inching toward that reality. Researchers are seriously investigating whether inducing a torpor-like state in astronauts could be the key to Mars missions. In this state, their metabolic needs would plummet. They would require less food, less water, produce less waste, and be protected from the monotony and radiation of deep space. Their journey would pass in what felt like a long, dreamless sleep, waking only as their red destination grows large in the viewport. It turns the ship from a bustling, resource-heavy habitat into a quiet, efficient vessel carrying its precious cargo in profound rest. This research is a beautiful example of biomimicry, of humans learning from nature's solutions. The Arctic ground squirrel doesn't care about stroke treatment or Mars missions. It simply follows an ancient rhythm that ensures its survival. But in that rhythm, we see a blueprint for resilience. We see a way to protect the brain when it's most vulnerable, to preserve life when time is short, and to journey further than our bodies were ever meant to go. It's a hopeful, forward-looking field, still in its early days, filled with more questions than answers. But each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle. Each understanding of how a bear's heart withstands months of slow beating, or how a bat's immune system remains vigilant during torpor, brings us closer to translating these wonders into healing. So, as we consider the applied potential of this deep sleep, we must also ask a more fundamental question: what at its core is happening within the brain during this state? How does the electrical symphony of hibernation compare to the gentle waves of our own nightly rest? To understand that, we need to listen to the sleeping brain itself. If you've ever wondered what happens inside a brain when it's not quite sleeping, not quite awake, but operating at the very extremes of existence, tonight we'll explore those fascinating landscapes. We're going to look at the brain's electrical language as it shifts from the gentle rhythms of ordinary sleep to the profound quiet of torpor and deep hibernation. Think of the brain as a grand orchestra. In ordinary sleep, different sections play in coordinated patterns, creating the beautiful, complex symphony of restorative rest. But in the states we're about to examine, the orchestra doesn't just quiet down, it fundamentally changes how it makes music, preserving the essential structure of the composition even when the volume is nearly turned off completely. As we've journeyed through the remarkable adaptations of hibernation and torpor, we might wonder how these extraordinary abilities came to be. If you'll imagine for a moment the tapestry of life on our planet, woven across millions of years, you'll find that the threads of deep sleep have been stitched into that fabric, not once, but many times. Torpor and hibernation are what scientists call convergent evolution, like different weavers arriving at the same beautiful pattern independently. These abilities didn't arise from a single common ancestor that passed the trait down to all its descendants. Instead, various species, facing similar environmental pressures, discovered this profound metabolic solution separately. It's as if nature found the same secret doorway to survival multiple times on different continents, in different evolutionary lineages. Consider this. Bears and ground squirrels both hibernate, but their last common ancestor lived tens of millions of years ago and likely didn't hibernate at all. Bats and hummingbirds enter torpor, though one is a mammal and the other a bird, with vastly different evolutionary histories. Even among mammals, the mechanisms differ. Some lower their body temperature just a few degrees, while others drop to near freezing. This independent evolution tells us something important, that the ability to dramatically slow metabolism, to essentially pause the biological clock, must be an incredibly valuable survival strategy. When the environment presents harsh conditions, whether extreme cold or scarcity of food, multiple branches of the tree of life found similar solutions. But what pressures drove these adaptations? Think of it like this. Every species is engaged in a delicate balancing act. On one side of the scale are the resources available: food, warmth, shelter. On the other side are the demands of survival, the energy needed to find mates, raise young, avoid predators, and simply maintain the body's functions. For many animals in temperate or Arctic regions, winter tips the balance dramatically. The energy required to stay warm and find scarce food becomes too great. So evolution, through countless generations of trial and error, found a way to reset the scale by dramatically lowering the energy demands. Hibernation isn't just sleeping through winter. It's a profound recalibration of what it means to be alive, a temporary redefinition of life's minimum requirements. Now, as we consider these evolutionary achievements, we must also turn our attention to the present challenges. The very environmental pressures that shaped hibernation are changing in ways that evolution never prepared these animals for. Climate change is rewriting the rules of winter. Imagine a bear that has evolved over millennia to enter its den when days shorten and temperatures drop, emerging when spring returns. Now imagine that winter arrives later, ends earlier, or brings unpredictable warm spells that disrupt the metabolic rhythms honed over countless generations. For hibernators, timing is everything. Emerging too early means facing a world without sufficient food, while entering hibernation too late means expending precious energy. These disruptions create conservation concerns that extend far beyond individual species. Hibernators often serve as ecological keystones. Their activities shape entire ecosystems. Bats control insect populations. Bears distribute seeds through their scat, and ground squirrels aerate soil and provide food for predators. When their hibernation cycles are disrupted, ripple effects spread through the food web. It's like removing a key gear from a complex clockwork. The entire mechanism begins to malfunction. Scientists studying these animals face the delicate task of understanding how to protect them while their very survival strategies are being undermined by a changing climate. Some species may be able to adapt their timing, while others might face more dire consequences. This brings us to a poignant reflection. These ancient survival strategies, perfected over eons, now face unprecedented challenges. The deep sleep that has carried species through ice ages and warming periods must now confront changes happening at a pace that evolution can scarcely match. As we learn more about hibernation, we're not just uncovering biological curiosities, we're gaining insights into resilience, adaptation, and the delicate balance between organisms and their environments. These lessons about metabolic flexibility, about how to survive scarcity, might even hold wisdom for our own species as we navigate an uncertain future. From these evolutionary threads woven through deep time and the environmental pressures shaping our present moment, our journey naturally turns toward the frontiers of discovery, to where researchers are pushing the boundaries of what we know about sleep, hibernation, and the remarkable possibilities they might unlock. And now, with our journey through hibernation's wonders fresh in our minds, we arrive at another threshold, the frontiers of research, where science is actively decoding the secrets we've been contemplating. This is where observation becomes experimentation, where curiosity transforms into discovery, and where the mysteries of deep rest become the focus of intense scientific exploration. Let us move gently into this world of inquiry, where the quiet calm of sleep meets the quiet intensity of scientific pursuit. The search begins deep within, at the very blueprint of life itself. Scientists are now peering into our genetic code, trying to identify the specific genes that orchestrate hibernation. Imagine these genes as a symphony conductor's score with particular notes and melodies that, when played in the right sequence, prompt the body to enter that profound state of suspended animation. In creatures like the 13-lined ground squirrel, researchers have found entire sets of genes that switch on just as hibernation begins, genes responsible for metabolic regulation, temperature control, and cellular protection. The fascinating question is whether these genetic melodies might be latent within us too, perhaps unused, but present somewhere in our own biological composition. Moving from the genetic level to the neural landscape, scientists are mapping what they call the hibernation circuits in the brain. Think of this as charting the electrical grid of a sleeping city, finding which neural pathways light up and which go quiet during torpor. They're discovering clusters of neurons that act as master switches, sending signals that gradually lower body temperature and slow metabolism. In mice, for instance, activating just a few specific neurons in the hypothalamus can induce a state remarkably similar to torpor. The implications are profound. If we can understand this circuitry, we might one day learn how to gently toggle these switches ourselves for therapeutic purposes, or perhaps, even as we'll consider later, for long journeys through space. At the cellular level, researchers are watching how individual cells transform during hibernation. They've discovered cells become remarkably resilient, almost entering a state of biological hibernation themselves. Proteins fold differently. Membranes become more fluid, and mitochondria, the powerhouses of cells, change how they produce energy. It's as if each cell receives instructions to downsize its operations while reinforcing its protective barriers against damage. This cellular adaptation explains how hibernating animals can emerge from months of inactivity without suffering the muscle atrophy or organ damage that would devastate a non-hibernator. Understanding these mechanisms could revolutionize how we approach human conditions that involve tissue preservation and recovery. And then there's the translation, the beautiful movement from laboratory discovery to human medicine. Doctors and researchers are actively exploring how hibernation's lessons might help heal. They're studying whether inducing mild, controlled hypothermia, a cousin to hibernation's temperature drop, could protect patients during complex surgeries or after traumatic injuries. They're investigating whether the metabolic slowdown observed in hibernation could be mimicked to preserve organs for transplantation. Some are even exploring whether the patterns of brain activity during torpor might offer clues for treating neurological disorders or improving recovery from strokes. Each of these frontiers represents a bridge between what animals do naturally and what medicine might one day achieve with intention and care. Perhaps most poetically, this research extends beyond our world entirely. Space agencies are deeply interested in hibernation as a potential solution for human space travel across vast cosmic distances. Imagine embarking on a journey to Mars or beyond. Not in a state of anxious wakefulness for months on end, but in a peaceful, extended slumber where time itself seems to soften. The body would require fewer resources. The mind would be spared psychological strain, and the journey that feels impossibly long in conscious time might pass in what seems like a single, restful night. This isn't science fiction anymore. It's a serious area of study, with researchers working to understand how to safely induce and maintain a hibernation-like state for human astronauts. All these research avenues, from genes to neurons to cells to medicine to stars, are interconnected. They share a common thread: the recognition that profound rest isn't merely the absence of activity, but a complex, orchestrated biological state with immense potential. Each discovery in a laboratory, each map of a neural circuit, each understanding of a cellular adaptation brings us closer to appreciating the depth of sleep's mysteries, and perhaps one day, to gently borrowing its most precious gifts for our own healing and exploration. Which leads us naturally to where all journeys ultimately circle back to reflection, to integration, to the quiet moment after learning, when we let all we've discovered settle into understanding. A moment we'll come to next as we prepare to bring our exploration to a quiet close. As we come to the end of our journey together through the world of sleep and hibernation, I invite you to settle into a quiet space of reflection. Think about what all these mysteries, the long winter slumbers of animals, the strange wanderings of sleepwalking, the vivid flights of sleep paralysis, tell us about life itself. In the grand scheme of things, sleep is not just a nightly necessity or a passive state. It's a deep, ancient rhythm woven into the very fabric of our biology, a necessary retreat from the waking world that allows us to survive, to heal, to remember. It is in many ways the secret twin of consciousness, a realm where our minds travel without our bodies, where animals can pause time itself to outlast the cold, and where our brains perform the quiet, essential maintenance that makes us who we are. When you consider the bear, curled in its den for months, its metabolism slowed to a whisper, it's almost like watching a piece of life hit the pause button. And yet, that pause is not empty. It's a different mode of being, a profound lesson in conservation and resilience. Our own sleep disorders, as unsettling as they can be, are like brief cracks in the window through which we glimpse this other world, a world normally hidden from our waking selves. They remind us that consciousness is not a simple on-off switch, but a spectrum, a tide that ebbs and flows through our brains and bodies with the precision of a cosmic clock. This rhythm, this need to withdraw and restore, connects us to every other creature on this planet. From the smallest insect to the largest whale, we all answer the same fundamental call to rest. It is a humbling and beautiful thought. As you drift toward your own sleep tonight, consider that you are participating in this ancient universal cycle. Your breathing slows, your thoughts soften, and you join a quiet, planet-wide symphony of rest. Let the mysteries we've explored tonight, the science, the strangeness, the sheer wonder of it all, soften into the background of your mind. There are no puzzles to solve here, only patterns to appreciate, rhythms to surrender to. So let go of any curiosity still clinging to the edges of your awareness. Allow the calm of what you now know, or perhaps what you now accept as unknowable, to wash over you. You are part of something vast and gentle, a biological truth as old as life. And now the quiet awaits you.